I have tried to spend the vast majority of this week listening, trying to take in as much information as I possibly could about the state of our country right now, as well as its history that we weren't taught in our schools. I, like many white people, have always considered myself an ally when really I wasn't doing nearly enough to carry that title. I want to put a disclaimer in here that I'm about to use a lot of I statements in the first part of this video, primarily to talk to my white viewers and let you know about my upbringing, what I used to think, why I thought that was enough, and why it wasn't. To my POC viewers, I very much know that this conversation is not about me, but I wanted to reach as many people through my specific platform as possible. After an entire week of trying to decide how best to do that, I feel and hope that I will be able to make a point that I wouldn't otherwise be able to make by including this information. I promise to try and move through it as quickly as possible so that we can talk more about the movement as a whole and action items that people can do moving forward. I also want to let everyone know that there is a list of resources in the description so that everyone can continue to learn and listen to the Black voices in our community that have a lot more relevant information to say about what's actually been happening to their communities over the last several hundred years in our country. I have always felt fortunate to have grown up in San Jose, California, where when I was a child during the 90s, whites made up approximately 60% of the population, and where now in 2020, whites only make up 40% of the population. While I'm very grateful to have grown up in an area that has a lot of diversity, I still had a primarily white upbringing in a white neighborhood with lots of white privilege to go around. I had plenty of friends that were other races, primarily Hispanic and Asian races, but I don't ever really remember the topic of race being brought up very much. In fact, the first time that I can recall being very conscious of my race was when I went to college in Humboldt County of Northern California, where I was suddenly surrounded by a vast sea of other white people, and I thought, where the F did everyone else go? Well, I guess not to a rural logging town. In addition to the city that I grew up in, my dating history was also unintentionally very inclusive of other races, including people and direct immigrants from nearly every continent except for Australia and Antarctica. I vote, I encourage others to vote, I say something on social media when I see something that isn't right, and during the last presidential election, I even had a panic attack that lasted for hours. It escalated over the course of the results coming in, and I finally collapsed into an inconsolable ball of tears, terrified for every one of my friends who fell into a minority group. I sobbed myself to sleep, I woke up, I cried for 2 more days, and then spent the next 6 months in a fog of severe depression. So all of this to say, I care. That's enough, right? No, it's not. Throughout all of this, I've still been in my own bubble of white privilege, withdrawing from the world whenever things get to be too much. Now, don't get me wrong, I highly value the skills that I've learned over the last 6 years in particular through my pain management, as many of you already know, that have helped me to speak up and take care of myself without overextending. I wouldn't be the confident voice that I am today without that. However, the problem with all of this is that my skin allows me to do that freely. I had access to medical insurance in the first place. I have a parent that was able to support me when I left my job and things got rough. I was able to build a career from nothing on the internet, and I never really thought about that before, but now realize how much harder that would have been if my skin had been darker, simply because there are some white people that may not have watched my content if I looked differently from them, whether subconsciously or consciously. Meanwhile, over the last few years, I've been choosing not to engage in the news if I could help it. Between climate change, the horrible things coming out of our president's mouth day after day, and most recently COVID, I thought, why surround myself with news if there's nothing outside of what I'm already doing that can stop it from happening or getting worse? I told myself that if anything really important came along, I had friends and family that would let me know. And for all the topics that I've already mentioned, that was pretty much how it went. The problem was that I don't have many close Black friends, and whether or not people want to admit it, news tends to get filtered out by race. I had no idea what else was going on outside the walls of my apartment, and it wasn't remedied until I was having a phone conversation with one of the people who happens to matter most to me, and also happens to be a Black man. We were talking about the news. I'm using air quotes around the word news because we didn't specify what that meant, but I thought that meant we were talking about the constant outpouring of COVID information, the deaths that we've been dealing with for months. He was asking me how I could just choose to disengage. Why wasn't I more outraged? And he pointed to my privilege. I started to get confused and the conversation escalated. I was nearly yelling to the point where I was saying, there's nothing I can do, so why bother being surrounded by news of it 24/7 when I'm already doing everything I can to prevent what's happening? And that's when he snapped back with a desperation in his voice that I will never forget and can't hope to replicate here. But he said, "They are hunting us in the streets. How can you ignore that?" And that is the first time that I heard about Ahmaud Arbery. I'm sorry that I wasn't listening. I am listening now, and I am trying to learn. Since then, I've done my best to take in as much information as possible on any given day, going from extremely little time spent on the news and social media to having my phone in my hand whenever I can. I've been seeking out information on the riots, trying to educate myself about our country's history, like the version they don't teach us here growing up, like how the police was actually an organization founded to preserve slavery in the South. I've been seeking out videos from Black activists, including content creators on social media, as well as longer format videos on YouTube, like Obama's town hall. I've been looking for current events on Twitter to stay up to date on what's happening and stay informed about the riots. I am trying to repost resources and Black artists' work to my Instagram stories to boost their signal, and I'm trying to gather a reading list on my own of both fiction and biographies. Suggestions are more than welcome here. Currently, I'm listening to Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. For those of you unfamiliar with him, he's an extremely intelligent and articulate comedian that usually hosts The Daily Show. He's just barely older than I am and grew up in South Africa during the dismantling of apartheid as a mixed race or colored person, which was actually illegal at the time that he was born. For those not interested in the entire book, though I do highly recommend it, he has a great video here on YouTube where he uses a very easy to understand analogy about racism that I think every white person needs to hear, so that'll be linked in the description as well. Please watch it if you haven't already. So as a white person specifically, how can we help? First off, you really gotta stop saying all lives matter. Of course, all lives matter, but saying that all lives matter when your life was never in question is ridiculous. We've all seen the meme by now, I hope, recently, that if your neighbor's house is on fire and they're trying to put it out with a hose and you jump in and say, but what about my house? When your house is not on fire is so unbelievably selfish, I don't even have words. Along the same vein, we need to listen. You need to listen and not be defensive if you're called out. This is a really hard one for me. I want to do right by everyone. I think that I'm doing right by everyone, but if I am told I am not doing right, I vow here and now to listen and try and make the appropriate adjustments. We all need to learn how to take in criticism and come out better on the other side for it. Also, if you're unfamiliar with the term gaslighting, please go look up what that is and learn how to not do it to other people, especially to people who have been oppressed for hundreds of years. It is not fair, it is not right, and we need to knock that off. Educate yourself and don't ask Black people to do the work for you. This is something I was teetering with on the first couple days of my revelation about what I needed to do. How did I need to do it? I didn't know if I should reach out and ask about things, and I'm really glad that I didn't. It's a lot of information, y'all, but luckily we have the internet. Your Black friends are tired, they are stressed, they are exhausted, they are upset. They could be feeling a range of emotions, and we don't need to put the extra work on them of asking them how we're supposed to react or what we're supposed to know when that's on us. Researching is going to take time. It's hard. You don't have to know it all overnight, but you do need to know it. And ignorance is not permission to be racist or support racism by being silent. So get on that right now. Don't wait. Okay? Yeah, go. Learn how to sort out the information that's coming to you in your newsfeed. What is actually happening in the world? What is sensationalized news that the media wants you to see to steer you off track? And what is straight up propaganda? Believe the people who are being oppressed and not those who gain power by keeping those other voices silenced. I really recommend getting out of the echo chamber that is Facebook, at least for a little bit each day. We surround ourselves with people who think like us. So instead, I'm going to ask you to challenge yourself and find other people to have conversations with that are outside your immediate circle in a kind and respectful way. And please, for the love of all that is good and pure in the world, seek out statistically unbiased news sources. Please, it is so important. We also need to realize that there is a difference between the violent people in this movement, which include both rioter extremists, as well as actual cops that are on video instigating fights and damaging property to frame protesters, from the millions of people who are peacefully protesting across all 50 states and now globally around the world in other countries for equal human rights. They are not the same thing. And if you're upset about the violence, I encourage you to, one, justify or vet or do research on who actually caused the violence. And secondly, realize that that's not what the peaceful protesters are asking for. We also need to realize that if this did come down to property damage versus murdering humans, one is clearly worse than the other, so let's stop using that as an excuse altogether. If you do decide to go to protest yourself, be sure to look online for resources on how to stay safe, what to bring with you, what not to bring with you, and even how to deal with violence and tear gas before you leave the house. There are resources that are circulating around Twitter and Instagram. They're really great. Make sure you look them up. Also, make sure to wear a mask, as we are still amidst a global pandemic. If you can't physically protest or don't want to take the risk with the pandemic, realize that there are many other ways to help support the movement, including all the things that we're talking about here today. A great concrete way to help is to donate where you can, as often as you can, and be aware that the organizations that need your help might vary depending on the timing. Check out blacklivesmatter.carrd.co for the most up-to-date information. If you cannot financially donate, there is a long-form video here on YouTube with tons of ads that are sprinkled throughout it, with all of that ad revenue going towards donations. You can watch it and or just leave it on in the background. I'll put a link in the description with everything else. If you are not already registered to vote, please register to vote and then actually make sure you go and vote. We're not just voting on the president in this next election. If you want to see local change, you need to vote locally at the city, county, and state levels. There are elections in between presidential elections too, so if you don't vote in those, make sure to put it on your calendar and do that next time it comes around. If you want to support change and racial justice, you have to do this. It's not negotiable. And finally, do not stand in the silence as others suffer. Stand up for what you feel is right and continue to have difficult but important conversations. If someone that you're talking to makes a passing racist comment or a direct racist comment, gently or not so gently, call them out on it, depending on how you feel they will receive that information best, and talk to them about why what they're saying is harmful. Our own discomfort of not wanting to have those difficult conversations is not worth someone else suffering or even dying because of it. If there are any white people watching this video who are offended by something that I've said today, well, that's too bad. Unlearning a lifetime of racism and directly confronting the fact that we've been supporting racism with our silence and our excuses is a hard pill to swallow, but it is right and the only thing that we can do if we want to overcome this. We have all had hard lives, but some have had it a hell of a lot harder due to the color of their skin that they were born with. So now is not the time to lament about our own hardships or say, like, I had it hard too. What about this? What about that? This is about Black Lives Matter, period. And I hope that that eventually finds some purchase with you. To my Black and POC viewers, I am positive that there will be things that I have failed to cover in this video. I want to support you in any way that I can, so if you have been hurt or angered by something that I've said or accidentally left out, please let me know either in a comment below or feel free to message me privately. I am so deeply and sincerely sorry for what my race in this country is and has been doing to you for generations. I am trying to listen, to process, and to implement change in myself, and to share that with others. I am sure that I'm going to make more mistakes along the way, but I want to be a better ally for you. Oh, hey guys, there's been some artwork going on here, hasn't there? These birds were painted using the international logo of human rights as a template. This logo was created in 2010 and is free of copyright. It exists purely to spread awareness for human rights around the world and depicts the outline of a bird in the shape of a hand with a thumb clasping over it. I don't know why I've never seen this logo before, and I think it needs a lot more attention. I want to give a special thanks to that very important person in my life who, one, brought this entire situation into my field of view and who helped me to brainstorm ideas for this artwork, ultimately finding this logo that I ended up using as a template. Being a wildlife painter, I struggled to how best create some artwork to spread awareness for this movement. There are some absolutely incredible portraits that I have seen by other artists helping us to remember the victims, so I wanted to add a little bit something different and closer to my wheelhouse. I couldn't decide on whether or not I wanted to paint the bird brown or black, so I decided to do both. These prints will be available for sale in my shop, with all of the profits being donated to organizations that are helping to support the Black community based on the need at the time of the donation. If you are on the fence or straight up not into this artwork, that is totally fine. Please just consider making a direct donation to an organization in need. I have one more ask. I know I've asked a lot of my viewers today, but I have one more thing I want to ask before we close out this video, to my white viewers in particular. Please do not comment on this video telling me that I'm brave or strong or whatever for making a public stance on this issue. It's honestly just common decency at this point, I feel like, and I don't want praise or a pat on the back for that. Plus, those comments take away the focus from the actual activists who have been doing this for years, if not decades, to fight against racism. I was living under the assumption that I was already an ally, but that wasn't true. Now I am just trying to make up for lost time and use my platform to encourage others to do the same. If you want to thank me for speaking up, please visit the links in the description, and let's all just try to do a little bit better. Or a lot better. Let's do a lot better. To every person of color watching, to everyone celebrating Pride this month as well, you are welcome here. I see you, and I am listening.